So I just wanted to go over a tutorial on verbs because some of that information is new, and when students are doing homework or studying on things, this might be some helpful information. First of all, we have covered what students already knew about verbs, and we have covered action, and just simply those are the verbs that we do. Jump, run, play, talk, and those have been easy for the students to identify. The next type of verb that we talked about was a helping verb, and students have a song that they have written down in their notebooks, and it's sung to the tune of Jingle Bells, but it's like helping verbs, there are 23, am, is, are, was, and were, being, been, and be. And if they will memorize that, then they will know those helping verbs when they see them in a sentence. An important thing we've told students about helping verbs is if there is not an action verb in the sentence for the helping verb to help, then it will not be a helping verb. So for example, if I write the sentence, I am tired, am is in our helping verb song. However, in this sentence, there's not an action verb for it to help, and so it will not be classified as a helping verb. The verb that it is our third type of verb that we have discussed, and those are linking verbs. We also have a song for the linking verbs, and it is sung to the tune of London Bridges, and there are other verbs that show up in the linking verb song. And these are some of the words. Look, feel, seem, remain, become. So some of the linking verbs might not only resemble helping verbs, but they might resemble some action verbs. So very quickly, the next important thing that we have discussed is that sometimes the verb in the sentence, Mrs. Bowles smells the flower, Mrs. Bowles is doing the action. She is actually smelling the flower. However, in this sentence, it says the flower smells lovely. Well, we know that flowers cannot show action like humans can, so the flower is not actually smelling anything itself. It's just giving off this scent. So in this case, smells is a linking verb, because the job of linking verbs is to link adjectives, which we call the predicate adjective because it comes after the predicate or the verb, or it can also link a noun, which we call a predicate noun, back to the subject. In that case, if I said, Mrs. Bowles is a teacher, my linking verb is, and is linking this predicate noun teacher back to Mrs. Bowles. What we have told students is if they will just insert an equal sign for the linking verb, you're basically saying the flower equals lovely, or the flower is lovely, or Mrs. Bowles equals the teacher, or Mrs. Bowles is the teacher. It doesn't work with an action verb because if I insert equals, then I'm saying Mrs. Bowles equals the flower, and of course Mrs. Bowles is not a flower. Here's another example of a linking verb. Sarah is kind. So although is might resemble a helping verb, I know it's not helping another action verb in this sentence, but what it is doing is taking this adjective kind and linking it back to Sarah. Sarah equals kind. In this sentence, Luke plays the violin. We have an action verb, and nothing is helping it, so it is only an action verb in that sentence. In this sentence, Ethan is running in the hallway. We do have an action verb, running. Ethan can run. And then there is another verb here, is, and is helping the action verb. We can have more than one helping verb into a sentence. For example, if I said, Ethan should be coming soon, then should and be are also helping that action verb coming. So that is the more basic information, and students have a packet that they have practiced on in their binder, and it's on helping verbs and action verbs and linking verbs. The next step was a little more confusing for students, and that's mostly what I wanted to cover. So first of all, we covered the information that they would already know from elementary school, which is the past and the present and the future. So verbs come in tenses. The past tense, it already happened. The present tense, it's happening now. And the future tense, it will happen. One big thing I think that people get confused on is when it's happening right now in the present tense. We don't put an ing on our basic present tense verbs. For example, if I said, Mrs. Bowles teaches the lesson, then this is the verb in the present tense. Mrs. Bowles teaches the lesson. However, people think that if I said Mrs. Bowles is teaching the lesson, that's our basic present tense. If a word ends in ing and it is acting as the verb, we actually call that the progressive tense. And you'll see that in the word progressive is the word progress. So I sort of think about, with the progressive tense, something is in progress. And in the progressive tense, something can be in progress. So in the present time, it can be present progressive, like Mrs. Bowles is teaching the lesson. However, we can also have a progressive tense in the past, such as Mrs. Bowles was teaching the lesson. And we can have a progressive tense in the future. Mrs. Bowles will be teaching the lesson. So if it ends in ing, we call it progressive. So the basic past tense, you add a d or ed to. The present tense is going to just be the basic form of the verb. If we have a singular subject like Mrs. Bowles, then we put an s on that verb, so teaches. But if we have a plural subject, let's say they, then of course that s would go away and it would be they teach the lesson. And all we do for the future tense is we put will on there. So we did practice with past, present, and future. Students have a packet with that information too, and then there's a lot of examples that students can go over. The next piece of new information that we learned is that there are principal parts to a verb. And this was the new information. So I like to think of these principal parts as building blocks or tools to build the tenses. So the principal parts are not the same as the verb tenses. We have the base form, and sometimes that might be referred to by others as the present, then the present participle, and then we have the past, which is sometimes referred as the imperfect, and then we have the past participle. So here's an example of how a verb is in each one of the principal parts. In the base form, or what some people call the present, it just looks simply like a regular verb, jump, or play, or run, or talk. When we move to the present participle, we're going to have an ing, and we are always going to have some sort of helping verb. Either it's going to be is jumping, or was jumping, or will be jumping. When it's in the past part, it is just a verb that looks like it's in the past with a d or an ed, and sometimes those might be irregular. Like for example, run in the past would be ran. And then we have the past participle, which looks like the past form, but it has to have a helping verb with it. So here it would either be had jumped, or it could be has jumped, or have jumped, or it could be will have jumped. So the first thing is that we made sure that we're memorizing these. and I like to think them in categories. So for a test and for homework and ongoingly, the students need to know there's a base form, a present participle, a past, and a past participle. Always keeping it in that order. That's going to be important later when we conjugate a verb. So we have done some practice, and they also have done a practice sheet where we work through it together, and that is in the notebook as well to review. So on a test, they might be asked, okay, recall the 4 principal parts, and now look in a sentence or look at the verb and tell me what principal part's being used. So play. That would be in the base form. Had walked, because it looks like the past here, but it has a helping verb, it's going to be the past participle. Cried, since it does not have a helping verb and simply looks like the past, it goes with the past part. And is laughing, because it ends in ing, and it has a helping verb, it goes with the present participle. So, in class, what we said was that you take these parts, so you're going to take the base form, or you're going to take the present participle, or you're going to take the past, or the past participle, and use those parts to create the tenses. And this year, we're going to go over 6 tenses, and also remembering that before we said that there is a progressive tense too. So if I am making the present, the past, the future, and then there's 3 more tenses that we're going to talk about, and that is the present perfect, the past perfect, and the future perfect. If we are building these tenses, we're going to be using the principal parts of the verb. So let's say I want to take the verb smile. If I run smile through my principal parts, it's going to be smile in the base form, smiling in the present participle, smiled in the past, and also smiled in the past participle. And if I want to create the present tense, I'm just going to use the base form. And so in a sentence, then I would say, Julie smiles. If it was plural, then I would say, the girls smile. If I want to create the past tense, I need to take the tool or borrow from this past part. So simply I would say that Julie smiled, or they smiled. And if I want to create the future tense, then I have to borrow from the base form again and simply put in front will, which is a helping verb, and create will smile. Julie will smile. If I want to create the progressive tense, I am borrowing from the present participle. So if I want to say it's happening right now, I'm going to say it is smiling. If I want to say it happened yesterday, was smiling. And if I want to say it will happen sometime in the future, I say will be smiling. But I'm using these tools right here to build the progressive tense. If I am going to build what I call the perfect tenses, I must use these tools, which are in the past participle. So these tools will be for all of the perfect tenses. And that means when I make the perfect tense, they will all end in the same type of verb. Smiled, smiled, smiled. The only difference will be the helping verb at the beginning. So I'm going to give a quick reminder about what those perfect tenses are. If there are only the 3 tenses, like the present, past, and the future, I could not tell you that something has been finished and completed right now. For example, if I write Caitlin says the pledge, says is in the present tense. But sometimes I want to say that she said it right now at this moment and finished it. If I do that, then my sentence is going to sound like Caitlin has said the pledge. And that is different than me saying Caitlin says the pledge. I want to say that she has said it right now and now it's complete. So I use a tense called the present perfect. And it's easy for students to remember that why it is called the perfect tense is because perfect in this sense means completed and done. It's been perfectly finished, completed. So when we talk about the perfect tenses, whether it happened in the present or the past or will happen in the future, we're talking about something that will be completed or has been completed. An important thing to remember about the perfect tenses is looking here at this has. If you see something that looks like the past here, but it has or have here, it's going to be called the present perfect. The next thing is called the past perfect. And that is, I could say that Neve threw the ball to Melanie. But that action's completed and done. It gives me limited way to say what I need to say. If I want to communicate, Neve had thrown the ball to Melanie before Melanie hurt her wrist, it's a different way to communicate the tense. And you'll notice here that instead of threw, I now have thrown, and I have a helping verb. That is called the past perfect tense. This is different than the present perfect because the present perfect has or have, but this has had. Next, we have the future perfect. And the future perfect tells us that sometime in the future, something will be completed, maybe before something else is done. If I write Jordan will write the story, this is just the basic future tense. I just have the verb write, which is the base form, and I put will in front of it. But if I want to say, Jordan will have written the story by the due date, or Jordan will have written the story before she goes to the movie, I'm going to say that sometime in the future it will be perfected or completed. So that's my future perfect tense. The difference between the future tense and the future perfect is, again, I'm using this past looking form of the verb, but I have helping verbs with it. And instead of having will write, I have will have written. And so that is my future perfect tense. So back to my building here. Smiled would be used every place. And if I said that Julie has smiled, then I have created the present perfect. If I say that Julie had smiled, then I have created the past perfect. And if I say that Julie will have smiled, then I have created the future perfect. And all of these are the same. It is just the helping verbs that change. And I can do that with any verb. So the first thing that we do is we take a verb and we run it through the 4 principal parts. So I don't just have to have a regular verb, and regular verbs are verbs that end in D or ED. I can also have an irregular verb. Run is in the base form. But in the present participle, it's running. In the past, it's ran. And in the past participle, it has had run, or has run, or have run. So if I am running this through, it's run, running, ran, run. I can use the principal parts, these are my tools, to create my tenses. So if I want to create the present tense, I use the base form. I run, present tense. If I want to create the past, then I would say I, and borrow from here, I ran. And if I want to create the future, then I borrow from the base form again, and I write I will run. If I want to say that I'm doing it right at this very moment, I could do the present progressive and say I am running. But if I want to write that I have completed something in this present moment, then I am going to come over here and borrow from this part, the past participle. And I am going to say I have run. And if I want to say that in the past I completed it before something else was done, I had run the race before 11 o'clock, then I would just do I had and then use run again. And then if I want to say that I'm going to do it sometime in the future and it will be completed or perfected, I will say I will have run the race before the weekend. I will have run. So notice that all of these are the same again because I'm only using these tools. If it's has or have, it's the present perfect. If it's had, it's the past perfect. And if it's will have, then it is the future perfect. And so that is the difference between the four principal parts and the tenses of the verbs. And again, that information is in the notebook for students to go over and review. And there's lots of examples where students have been picking out in sentences, am I looking at the present or the past perfect or the present perfect? The last thing that students need to know what to do, and they have a list of this, is to conjugate a verb. And when we say conjugate, all we're saying is that we're running a verb through the four principal parts. So if I want to conjugate jump, it is just jump, jumping, jumped, jumped. And jumped is a regular verb because it ends in ed here. However, if I'm conjugating an irregular verb, let's say like eat, I'm going to say eat, eating, ate, eaten. And I have conjugated the verb eat. And the reason I need to know how to conjugate is so that I can build my toolbox here, my four principal parts, to create my other verbs and my verb tenses. So if I want to say that it's right now in the present, okay, I eat. If in the past, I ate. In the future, I will eat. In the present progressive, I am eating. And in the present perfect, I have eaten. In the past perfect, I had eaten. And in the future perfect, I will have eaten. And that's important because sometimes we make mistakes. And I have heard people say, I seen it. And this is incorrect because someone is using this part of the toolbox, but they are not using a helping verb. And we've already said that if we want to use the past participle, it's always going to come with the helping verb. So if I say I have seen, that is correct. Or I had seen, that is correct. Or I will have seen, that is correct. But I seen is not. If I want to say it happened in the past, then I would just say I saw it. Additionally, I cannot just throw a helping verb in there. I can't say I have saw it because that would be incorrect. So people end up mistaking eat a lot and choosing the wrong one. Saw is another one that happens with. That's why we're working on conjugating them correctly. So students will look at their list. Another thing they'll have to do for a test is look at a verb, and they will be asked to conjugate it. So they might be given a verb like swim, and the test question will be conjugate the verb swim, and all they simply do is write swim, swimming, swam, swum. And some of the verbs are unusual for them because they are not used to saying them correctly. Another one that throws them for a loop is drink. So if we ask them to conjugate drink, it's drink, drinking, drank, drunk. So simply using these tools, which are my principal parts to make the tenses, I would say, I drink a soda, I drank a soda, I will drink a soda, I am drinking a soda in the present progressive. And if I want to say that in the present perfect, that I consumed something right now and it's done, then I would say, I have drunk a soda. And in the past, I had drunk a soda. And in the future, I will have drunk a soda. And students are used to saying, I have drank, and so that's where they need to learn the difference there. So that's basically it. Those are a review on action verbs, linking verbs, helping verbs, and also for the students to know the four principal parts, the base form, the present participle, the past and the past participle, and also for students to be able to tell the six tenses, the present, past, the future, the present perfect, the past perfect, and the future perfect, and to create those.